Welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally. If you missed our last episode with Kevin Jones about ways we can tell stories and make real-world connections using augmented reality in the classroom, please go back and check it out. Our guest today will help us to support a healthy mindset and attitude. He is an assistant principal and doctoral student. This New Yorker is a motivational speaker and YouTuber with Educanle Presents. Gear up. Please welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally, Andrew Canle.
Woo!
I feel like we need sound effects.
I know. We need a crowd.
I think so too.
we might have to invest.
To production.
We're all organic around here.
Andrew, we're so happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be connected with you all. Let's get started, Let's jump into it.
I can tell Letitia's like ready to go. So you go, girl.
Well, I'm a fan already, and I watched one of Andrew's latest YouTube videos on negativity, and I sent it to my daughter. She was like, "You need to send this to Grandma," and I said, "I will." So Grandma in Brooklyn has the negativity video mindset for the week. So that
I love it.
Why did you send that to your daughter, Letitia? Not her personal business, sorry, but what was the message that you really felt called to?
Well, first off, and I don't want to talk about Andrew like he's not with us.
That Andrew was a great guy.
He's really great. But really, Andrew, the video is short. It was like a minute and something, right, on negativity. And I just kind of felt that with the pandemic, and in my own family, it's impacting, right? I'm sure it's impacting others. And so, there's been a little negativity swirling. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to get Andrew on you. And I just sent the video, and it's so quick and impactful. So, that was kind of.
It's like a little vitamin.
For that.
Vitamin for the day.
Right.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Every time I hear somebody say that, it makes me so happy because that was the initial intent. The initial intent was, okay, we're doing remote learning. This is going back last March. And it was like, okay, how could I, as an administrator, number one, remain visible for the students, and number two, provide something that was practical to supplement teachers, efforts. So I started thinking, the best way to do it, something quick, so I'm not interrupting instruction, number one. And then something that's more about, the social and emotional, because we're always trying to help kids acquire, the mathematical skills, the English language arts skills. I wanted more of like a focus on the soft skills to help kids in life. And so I kind of have branded it as cultivating a positive mindset through a weekly focus question. And it's just a quick in and out, and that's it.
But that's so key, right? I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to go through a lot of your videos today. And there was a couple that definitely resonated with me, which I'll send to my kids, Letitia. So that's what I really loved about it. I mean, we're all, I guess from the entrepreneurial side, we're all in that vein, right? We're teachers by day and we're entrepreneurs by night. But the thing is, we study these things, we watch these things, where's the traction go? So they're all targeted right around that 55, 57 second time frame. Did you do any research beforehand, or is that really is that the whole, point right there, what you said, keep it to that frame, or did you study it at all?
It's probably sacrilegious of me to say, being a doctoral student, I did nothing about research, nothing like that. Kind of just went by gut instinct, which, it's worked out. I actually had a few teachers that are like, how do you time it so perfectly? I don't know. It just works out that way.
Oh, wow.
The new episodes, I have like a few cameos from more celebrity, I guess you'll say, athletes, things like that coming up, which haven't been published yet. So they'll be a little bit longer, like a minute and a half. But I think it's worth it. So yeah, I just kind of went by gut instinct on that.
But it's beautiful because the editing's easier, the upload's quicker, and all that. But it's impactful. That's what I think is something what Letitia just said is, you're not dragging out the message where people, they start off here and then they drop off. You're keeping them engaged. you're getting them to understand the message, and then you're out of there. And I think that's awesome. That's just fantastic, especially in this day and age of everything being, instant gratification.
The one thing about me and people that, are close to me and know me, I'm a man of few words, and I'm very careful with my words too. I like things simple yet significant. So, I don't believe in long meetings. They kind of just crush my soul. I think we could just get to the point really quickly. So, the quote mindset moments, when I was mapping it out, it's okay, let's give children a little zap of eureka, a little light bulb, for their day or their week, essentially, in the format I do it. That's kind of just where it all spawned from. It's in a good way, it's spiraled out of control. I didn't expect it to resonate so well with people, which I'm really glad that it does. To the point where, I've had a few publishing offers for a book, in which case I did accept one. So that's kind of in the works, but that's not for a personal plug here. That's just for, I didn't realize the power of how many people would like it.
It's interesting.
I really, we had a quick chat yesterday, Andrew and I, and that's the thing that I shared. You just feel the authenticity. If you just look at his body of work, you feel it it's woven everywhere. So I think that adds value. But I think it's awesome to point out at this moment how teachers have really and educators have risen up to the occasion during this pandemic, right? Like, how can we add our gifts and talents to support and help? Oh, I'll start a YouTube channel and we'll have quick, snapshots and quick bites every week just to keep us encouraged and motivated. And I just want to thank all of our listeners out there, teachers that, don't have the spotlight on them, don't have book deals, but that are rising to the occasion, being innovative and adding such great value to the emotional well-being of our kiddos. So kudos to you guys out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, listen, for me, who just recently 2 years ago, I was still teaching. I'm in my second year now as an administrator. And it's like, I personally think, and, I hope this resonates with some people. I'll go out on a limb and say it, but the classroom teacher is not only the most important role in education, it's probably the hardest. So anything to bring value to help them is always the goal. And it's a tough dichotomy, to juxtapose. It's almost like you need to make a platform for yourself to be able to help people. So, as you're making that platform, it could be seen one way or the other. But when I was kind of mapping this out, I wanted to keep it as much not about me as possible. And I tried to get some friends in on it to do some guest episodes, things like that. But just the way the pandemic and everything is working out, it turned out I'm now the host of the show. So that's just what happened.
One man show.
Yeah.
So Andrew, you've been assistant principal for 2 years, and one of those years being 2020.
Yeah.
And you're doing these videos on top and all, there's so much talk about how hard this has been for teachers and for students. There's no talk about how it's been for administrators. What has this been like from your point of view? You've been in the classroom and now you're in a different role, but it's still related. What has this journey been like in the last year for you? How are you holding it?
Thank you for bringing that up. It's something that rarely gets some light shed on it, but so I carry around in my back pocket a little tiny notebook, because if I'm seen in the hallway, everybody thinks that they're the first and only person coming up to me with something that they need, but they're really probably the 47th person. So I have to write everything down by the time I get to my office to, hold myself accountable for following up with these people and supporting them appropriately. So it's a lot for one mind to handle. So I have to write things down. That's number one. Number two, I try and, there's this quote that one of my old college professors used to preach, and it's in my head all day, every day, one step at a time. You got to go one step at a time. If you try and bite off the whole thing, you're going to choke. So you got to just nibble here and there and get to it. The third thing and final thing I would say that kind of helps me out is, so the first one, write it down. Second one, small bites, one step at a time. The third thing is definitely just relax, take a breath, and make sure that everyone, feels like they're being heard. That's number 3, because you don't want to be dismissive. Obviously, everyone's busy. Everyone's got 1,000 things going on. So in that moment, you want to give as much care as you possibly can, even if it's like humanly impossible in that moment. But you definitely want to make sure that everyone's feeling heard. And that kind of ties back into my first one. When they see me writing, I feel like it helps reinforce that, okay, I'm taking in what you need.
Excellent.
I'm a recruiter, Andrew, and you said long meetings are the death of you. And you're in tune and writing things down. You're going to have a line of teachers trying to come to your school when you get your own building.
Hey, listen, it's one of those things where if we can't, get something said within like 25 minutes rather than like a 3-hour meeting, then we probably need to come back and reconvene, because we don't really have the point of what's happening here. The second thing is, to keep conversations more driven and simple. I'm always asking myself, all right, what does this really have to do with children? Number 1. And number 2, how can I help you to help the children? If it's kind of veering off into all different areas, now that's kind of the fat that we need to trim right here and there. We could get to the other stuff, definitely. But in the heat of battle, we kind of have to remember our purpose of why we're here. It's for the children, and it's to help you, to help the children, you being the teacher. And the other thing that I just want to say, and with respect to that, is, it's really helpful when everybody knows you as a person, not necessarily as a professional. So if we could read each other personally, like that's Andrew as a person, and this is how he does it as an admin. And like, if you know those layers of each person, and that could affect in a positive way your approach, which can be really helpful. And it could also affect just the level of teamwork, because I think, especially now, and like you said, Pete, my whole administrative career has been, it's COVID. So all I know is this level of stress. So it's really, I feel it's really helpful if we're all just approaching each other with a little bit of human decency and a little bit of sensitivity, first and foremost, because yes, there's deadline. Listen, I'm from New York. It's fast. There's deadlines happening. I get it. But we'll get to it if we stick together. If we start to finger point or get frustrated or what have you, the whole ship is just going to come crashing down.
I like that. I like the idea, though, of you saying, understanding how people communicate. We did an exercise with my campus where, we went through the exercise of identifying our personality types. It was then associated with a color, and then everybody was assigned that color. So now you knew how to approach those people. What was interesting, though, it was a great exercise. It was all part of a strategic planning and meeting or weekend. But then when we went away from that meeting, the colors went away again. And I was like, why can't we stick those colors on our doors? So people understand like this is how I have to communicate you. But that's a great observation, especially during this time. I think that's so important for us to be able to understand each other, to communicate so much more, as Letitia would always remind us, intentionally and clearly, because a lot of stuff is caught up in the muck of COVID.
I think I want to just piggyback off that. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy, for lack of a better term. We're always striving to differentiate for every child, but we rarely do it for adults and our staff and things like that. So it just I see Letitia.
I think that's a touchdown. I think that's what that symbol meant.
Scored.
It's one of those things where I always like to say, students definitely come in all different shapes and sizes, ability levels, what have you, but our expectation never changes, right? Our strategy changes for different children. So our expectation for teachers doesn't change, but our strategy to help them get there can definitely change, So it's one of those things that I think in the heat of the moment, it's hard to think clearly. It really is, especially going back to my previous example of as I'm walking through the hallway, and you want to help, you want to answer them right then and there, but I want to give a really good answer. I don't want to give you, just a run-of-the-mill textbook answer. So sometimes that's frustrating for people. I actually tweeted that once and I got a little bit of heat on that, but I'd rather devote, my time to you if that takes me an extra 20 minutes to collect myself, and then I could come back and really think about your problem and then come back with a better answer, as opposed to, the instant gratification where it's not going to be that great of an answer. And then you'll kind of view me in a certain light of, I just want to shove people off. So I think taking the time to save the time is a big part of differentiating for different teachers. And in the end, I'll go out on a limb and say, I do think my staff appreciates that about my style, is that, I'm a thinker, and I need to really process what's best for not only you, what's best for your kids, what's best for the school, what's best for me and my schedule, and how I can best help you. So there's a lot of those variables that, you're right, Fred. I think it'd be helpful if people had little signs or what have you, or just a better understanding of each other.
I'm a processor.
Right.
I'm a processor.
I wrote this blog one day. I don't know where I got this idea, but I thought, you know what? If we all could write our own manual, right? When you buy things, when you buy our devices, you get a manual, right? That tells you exactly how things work, how to handle it if there's a problem, how they work best. And we don't do that for each other. Can you imagine how powerful that would be if you could show up at your school, let your leaders, your colleagues, your students, and the students let you know, like, this is my manual for me. This is how I work best. This is how you can help me when this isn't working for me, right?
I would like a lot of pictures in mine though. So it's
yeah, I think so. I'm coming from, before I was in the education space, I was an accounting major, go figure. We could get into that whole thing later on. It was never right for me. But, I think when I entered into education, I may have had a leg up. I'm not sure. But I think that viewing things in kind of a certain like marketing, business, psychological light kind of helped me deal with people probably a little easier than hitting. I never really hit speed bumps in terms of that. So I think that alone, how to deal, listen, education is definitely a business, but it's a people business. We're in the business of people, and our product are little people coming up to grow. So I think that when we think of it that way, it could really alleviate some of the issues of communication. And I see a lot of communication breakdown, just reading articles of what have you with the, schools going under and stuff like that. And I think, like I said, getting back to the meeting, right, long meetings, people are going to tune out. We need to have our vision, have our current state, and now what's the pathway to get there? And just over and over and over. And that's the mindset, over and over. Where are we now? Where are we going? How do we get there? I think that kind of psychological process really helps.
I really like that. And that's been a fairly consistent theme, right, Aaron? Yeah. And everybody through these past multiple episodes. And that is, so it's almost like there's this fear in education. And we've talked about this before. There's this fear in education that it says it has to be so unique. It can't be like business, because then all of a sudden we're doing something wrong. It's not about raising, we're not making money, but yet you're right. We're serving the student. But even that even gets thrown under the bus, because that sounds like then you're giving something away. You're doing something for them when really they need to be working with the rigor and achieving success and and going on. And I think that we have it wrong. I don't know. The more we've had these conversations these past few months, the more I'm seeing and hearing things like from people like yourself who are saying the same thing, but yet there's no clear plan for education to accept that, because the ivory tower must exist. And that it's not really an ivory tower. I mean, you know what I mean? Not in every K through 12 and even higher ed, but it does. It feels like if we could just recognize that we could still challenge, we could still, get people to become a better version of themselves, but also realizing that, we're individuals and we could serve them, which could produce a better outcome. But it's I don't know. Maybe it's because it's just too hard. I
think what happens is, and this is just my personal opinion, obviously, but I think what happens is teaching is a very personal profession. And I think teachers often mistakenly tie their self-worth to their teaching performances. And that should stay separated. You know, you as a person and you as a teacher are two separate things, just as, you know, a child and their student performance are two separate things. And so I think there's a very personal thing when people start to deny accepting, like, you know, a business type culture, even though that could just mean that they have a common playbook of how they do things, just like any school can do, a common language, a common playbook. You know, to use a sports analogy, if you go out there on a football field and everybody's kind of doing their own thing, we're never going to, you know, connect on a play.
Right.
So I think if we are able as educators to kind of just let go of that fear of, oh, okay, if my students failed at something, it doesn't mean that I'm not good at what I do. Actually, it probably means that if you've recognized that they're failing and now you're at that step and now you're figuring out what to do about it, you probably are a great teacher, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking I was in sales and marketing before I went into education as well. So I don't know what it is about that little piece of having that experience before going into the education world that makes things different. I'm sitting here thinking about, you know, if we are in the business of serving people, which we are, it's not that different than when someone owns like a cell phone business, right? And they understand what their customers want. They want a cell phone. They want it to work. They want good service. I'm trying to figure out why we can't at least come up with something where kind of like the Disney way, right? Where everyone, like Andrew keeps talking about, this idea of like, we're all in this together. This is kind of where we're headed, and this is what we believe in. And that way, every day when we go in, we know what we're serving. We know, we just have just a different attitude and excitement, I think, because we know what we feel more confident about what we're doing. Andrew, you mentioned something, I think it was today actually on social media, and I so related to it. And it was something about the fact that, you know, when we become teachers, we forget what it's like to be a student. And then when we become an admin, we forget what it's like to be a teacher. And so I feel like that's part of that customer service, or part of that business mentality of how do we kind of try to help that so that we don't forget who we're serving and what it was like to be in that position.
Yeah, I think it's just empathic values. It's leading with empathy. You know, when we lose understanding for each other, we lose everything, in my opinion. And so, once again, keeping things simple could be actually a very complex task, because everybody comes into it from a very different entry point with, you know, different backgrounds, different personalities, things like that. But just kind of referencing the business world, you know, in the business world, we say, you know, put your personality first, because people won't necessarily buy your product. They're buying who you are. So if we're getting quote unquote buy-in in like school cultures, and we have all these gurus on social media, you know, culture this, culture that, all that, that's great. But it's really, really muddy work that takes a long time to establish that. And if it happens quick, it's usually not going to have longevity. So in terms of just talking about that, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I have something in my head. This is how I work, I'm sorry. But in terms of that, like school culture and like cultivating that and strengthening that, for one to be long lasting far after you're gone as the teacher or the admin, and they have a whole new staff and all that, and it's still the same way, you know, that takes a really long time to build. And I think the only way to build that is to start with mutual respect and empathy for one another's abilities.
So interesting, Andrew, because as you were talking and you mentioned that you're marketing yourself, people are buying really you and not your product. I remember my assistant principal once just shaking me and saying, listen, we know the great work that you're doing in your classroom. It's time for you to let your colleagues know, to let the community know. Like, you need to let people inside the work that you're doing in this classroom. And I was horrified because that was so alien to me. But I took her advice. And the last thing she said is, let your light shine. And literally became teacher of the year. And I feel that the teaching culture doesn't allow you to do that, to shine, to kind of share your skills, talents, and abilities. So if you're not really in a place where you can do that, it's hard to be empathetic and welcoming of your colleague. If we're not really celebrating and making that part of our
it's tough. And I think there's really the secret sauce to education or anything really is just authenticity.
Yeah.
And, I think in today's world, especially with social media, we're all kind of just vying for attention for lack of a better term. But the one thing I do want to stress here, one of my beliefs, we can't choose, where we're born or what we're born into or any of those circumstances, but we can choose our mindset and how we react to things and how we treat other people. Like, that's well within our locus of control. I just think that if someone's struggling, it's hard for them to celebrate someone else. Mm-hmm. And that's why I believe that if you're experiencing success, extend a hand, let other people in on it. And if they reject that, just keep being yourself, keep doing your thing, because sooner or later, it's going to be contagious what you're spreading around. Hopefully, and it works both ways. Hopefully it's a positive thing, because, some toxicities can be contagious as well. But, like I said, it comes down to choice. And we have the choice to let things affect us one way or the other.
That was the video that I shared this afternoon. I come in as Get Me Coding, so I don't know if you picked up on that at all today. But
I forget the videos at this point, Fred. I
it was
them out. I don't know.
It was the woman that had the blue background. So, the one thing was the positive self-talk. I really liked what that message was, because I think that is a big thing. You can't lift others up if you can't lift yourself. So it's one of those things. I think that's a fantastic message. You know what though? As we're saying all this, I just had this thought, and you know how I am. Andrew, you go off on tangents. They know I go off on tangents times 7.
It's a safe space.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. I feel better now. That's the rise of the competition. So, interesting conversation I had with my brother-in-law. He was visiting to pick up a vehicle. He stopped by real quick, socially distancing, of course. And we were talking about Star Wars, and we were talking about lightsabers. And my godson, who's in middle school, is turned into the expert. And his father was amazed by how much he learned about lightsabers. And now, of course, it's lightsabers. It's not math. It's not science. It's not English. But it's he goes, "How did you learn so much?" He goes, "TikTok." And the one thing I'm starting to wonder here: are we aware as teachers that we are competing against? We may not be upfront competing, but there's another educational resource that's available to students, and they're finding it joyful, and they're finding it easy to obtain knowledge, and then they come back to the classroom where there's rigor, and there's those words that make them feel, if the teachers aren't practicing the things that you're espousing here, that I'm wondering what kind of wall is starting to go up now, or if any, maybe I'm making too big of a thing of something.
No, I don't think you are. I think my initial thought on that is there's no competition that matters outside of the one within yourself. I think that's the biggest competition there is. I know he's a polarizing figure, but I think recently Tom Brady is a great example of that. He has nowhere else to go. He is the top. He's got 7 championships. So competing with yourself is really the one and only competition that matters. And I think, with our kids growing up with, this era of the internet and social media and everybody, these edu celebrities and edupreneurs, whatever, we're all vying for attention or competing for, how do you differentiate yourself? And I think you differentiate yourself based on the value you bring. But then everybody has value. There's so many talented people out there. I think you just have to put yourself out there and just kind of let the market decide if you're interesting or not, and just be proud of what you're doing yourself. And don't let that, don't let the audience or whoever else, don't let that dictate your success. You decide what your success was. You set the goal and you go for it. And as a teacher, it's a kind of a roundabout way to respond to you. As a teacher, if you're seeing someone else in your profession that's reaching your kids in a better way, there's no shame in imitation is flattery. You could try and pick up things here and there. When I was playing soccer back in the day, of course I would look at the players better than me and I'd try and practice their moves and things like that so I could get better. I don't think, I think sometimes we're a little too prideful. And quite honestly, this might sound harsh. I think personal pride can really hurt kids.
I agree. I see. I'm not going to go into details, but I see it far too frequently, in my environment, to the point where people don't even want to share. It's because they're afraid they're letting the outside in too much, and they need to keep everybody out. And you're right that the people that suffer are the students. So it's almost like Letitia, I think that's along the lines of giving yourself permission, I guess, to some degree, to be not prideful, depending upon your environment. I guess it all depends on the school. Maybe if you have a really good environment at the school, it helps a lot.
Yeah, I think, talking about environments, I think you can make your environment. I think you could have blinders to certain things, because if your goal as a teacher is to help young minds acquire new skills, if there's anything else going on, then that's kind of outside of your purpose. You know what I mean? So if you're paying attention to things outside of that, I think that's erroneous.
Right.
So I'm curious, and maybe I don't think we really talked about this too much, but how did this whole YouTube sensation get started? What was the thing that kind of flipped and you're like, I'm doing this?
Well, so I have a kind of a strange background. I've played in like bands and I've acted in some commercials and movies, and I was so the reason why, I think I need to back up. The reason why I was in business school and why I was an accountant was because I was really big into soccer, and I played in D1 in college, the whole thing. So my whole thing was, I'm going to make it professional. That was the whole thing. So I would go to my guidance counselor in college and I'd say, listen, like, I don't really know what I want to do. Like, there is no backup plan. So they're like, oh, here's a recession-proof job, accountant, go into that. So I was like, okay, sure, why not? So I did that. I actually worked in New York City for maybe like 6 months before I realized this wasn't for me. And at that time, at night, I would be training kids' soccer teams. So ergo, I figured out I liked working with kids, went back for my master's. That's how the whole thing happened. So now that I've established that for you all, in terms of how did this whole YouTube thing happen? Well, like I said, I was thinking about what's a way that I could support during this pandemic. And I do have some, prowess with audio and video and things like that. So I said, why not put my talents to use here for, kids and teachers? And it just kind of, everything worked out perfectly, because we have this new period at my school called the wellness period, which is like kind of a morning meeting. But obviously there's some kids learning virtually. So how do you reach them? And we can't kind of coalesce on the carpet anymore. We need to stay distanced. So it was like, okay, they all have an iPad, or you can project it on the smart board. Here's this 1 minute thing. And I tried to map it out. So in the episodes, and I hope this comes across, I just want it to be a conversation starter. I try not to be so specific and hammer you with things. I just, here's this idea, and I want teachers to kind of take it and run with it. And so I kind of, each episode, if you could believe this, don't throw up here, each 1 minute episode probably takes me about like 4 hours to do. It's a lot of work. It's painstaking. I don't know how much longer I'll be doing it for. I really enjoy it. I do. So I'm going to try and keep it up, COVID has kind of gotten in the way. I just kind of posted on my socials that I need a little bit of time to kind of get season 2 rolling again, which it'll be out shortly. It's a lot of sweat equity, as one of my friends puts it. So that's kind of how it happened. And I only, Aaron, have continued it because people have told me kind of too, that it's working. So had I not kind of market tested it, for lack of a better term, I probably would have stopped, but I've gotten really good feedback and it seems like it's helping people. So that's what I'm here for.
So side note, what position did you play?
Oh, so this is interesting. We could talk soccer all day.
Oh, great.
I played for the #1 team in the nation my senior year of high school. So all of us kind of got recruited from that team. So I initially went to St. John's, which at the time was #4 in the United States. And then I transferred over to Hofstra, where I finished. And so my position by the top of my game, I was like an outside right fullback going up and down the line. Lots of running. That's why I can't run anymore now, guys. All you fitness gurus, stop telling me I could run. I can't do it anymore. But I try and still stay in shape now. But yeah, it was grueling for a while.
Yeah, I hear you. So you mentioned a football player. Do you have a soccer player that you admire or have always kind of loved to watch play?
I've always marveled at Zinedine Zidane. He played for Real Madrid. I think he coached Real Madrid recently. He played for France. I just loved how nobody could take the ball away from him. It was just marvelous. And it's always effortless, or it's impressive when somebody's effortless with their talent and it looks like they're not doing much, but it's like, no, they're very talented. So yeah, I would definitely say him.
Okay, we can carry on now with the podcast.
Sidebar is over.
Sports all day. I'm a sports.
Me too.
But I see a common thread. An athlete, coach, going into the classroom and then into an administrative position. I totally see a thread there. What traits have you picked up along the way that are still with you now that you're saying, "Gosh, I'm glad I have that in my arsenal. I have that in my toolbox"?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way I would answer that first is I think, and I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of people listening or even in this chat might agree. I think when I approach things, the reason why I would approach something is because I either look at it and observe and say, I think I could do that, and I think I could do that better. And so that's like the initial thought of the reason why I chose to go into elementary education is because I did feel, and this is not a knock on any of my elementary teachers, but I did feel like I could be possibly a better teacher than the ones that I had. And not because they weren't bad, just because I think I bring in some outside things like everybody else does. And so the traits that I picked up is, and this is going to sound very cliche, but I think I understand what children are going through. Just to reference what Aaron said, what I posted today on social media, I haven't forgotten what it's like being a kid. I haven't forgotten the challenges of nobody being home, of, what have you, list out all the problems that a child might encounter that they shouldn't have to encounter, but unfortunately this is our world. And I haven't forgotten what that's like. I think I've built up, since I've come through kind of tumultuous times growing up and things like that. I think I've built up a little bit of a thick skin and a lot of patience. I also think, like I said, on this podcast, of course, because it demands it, I'm talking a lot. In my real life, I don't really talk a lot. And I think people appreciate that because sometimes they just need someone to listen to. Mm-hmm. And I think that to get back to your, answering you, Pete, in terms of a trait, I think you don't even necessarily have to be a good listener. I think that's overrated. You just have to be accessible and be there so somebody can talk to you. So I think being accessible is definitely one thing. Listening, and you don't need to give advice. People just need to have a cathartic experience and get it out. I think one thing I've learned along the way is that you don't need to give advice. Only give advice if they ask you for it.
Right.
Some people just want to talk it out. I know I'm one of those people growing up, even right now. I sometimes just have an idea and I have to spew it out to somebody and talk it out. And once again, bringing this into the classroom, that's why I am an advocate of a lot of student talk. I think our students, how many times, I don't have kids, but, in the hallways, how many times, so how's your day going? Good. Or if they're at the dinner table, what'd you do at school? Nothing. And, that bleeds its way into their performance. Their articulation skills are not being strengthened. And I think that's a big thing that kind of touches upon everything as you're developing as a human, in terms of your social emotional, economy and how you deal with people. I do think that I think one of the most underrated literacies in life is likability. And I think you get that with interpersonal skills. And you can't get interpersonal skills if you don't practice them.
Correct.
So Pete, to answer you, I think all those things, my life, I've been pushed into situations where I've been uncomfortable and I had to develop these skills quickly. And I think if we don't do that for our kids, then, it's kind of a flip of a coin if they're going to be all right or not.
So I'm going to throw a question at you that we didn't get to share with you. I think everybody knows what I'm going to ask. A guest of ours a few episodes back, Joe Hamer, commented on something almost exactly you said, a little different. So we walk through the hallways, we say, how you doing? Yeah, fine. Boom, keep on going. So the question I'll ask you is, what's going well for you?
Like in my life personally, or?
Yeah, and that's the phrase that he would say when you're walking by someone, hey, what's going well? And then all of a sudden it causes everyone just to stop and then
I like that.
And actually answer. And you listen.
It's funny. I feel like admins have like certain catchphrases. So I like that. I'm going to add that to my repertoire. So I'll try to thank him. Mine has been, if I see a kid walking in the hallway, my question, and I wrote about this in Edutopia, they actually thought it was a good idea, which, okay, that's great. But it was, what have you learned so far today that you didn't know yesterday? And that's something that it makes the kids stop and say, well, I learned math. No, that's a subject. What did you learn about math? Well, we learned addition. No, that's a procedure. What did you learn about it? And, that question has always helped me to kind of, get down to the nitty gritty. And then I could help, the teacher and check in like, hey, listen, Jason or Jessica, they kind of told me this, just so heads up to you. I'm not sure if they really got it or not. Maybe sit with them for 5 minutes or so, or whatever the case may be. But okay. I really like that question you threw out there. Yeah, I'm going to use it.
Yeah. Could you answer it? That's the thing.
I can't answer it, and I will right now. And a humbling thought is always that it could always be worse. That's a really humbling thought. And so I think I'm naturally a gracious person. I'm thankful for everything I have. I think what's going well for me, quite honestly, and this might sound corny, but I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, mean it. I woke up today. I'm able-bodied. I could walk around. I'm breathing. There's no troubles here with my health, knock on wood. But that's always the first thing I think about in the morning, because I know what it's like growing up, not to get too far into this, but I kind of overcame a childhood bone disease where it affected, my walking and all that stuff. I know what it's like to really feel like a prisoner in your body. So that's definitely the first thing that's going well for me. The second thing that's going well for me is, quite honestly, I feel like there's a lot of blessings in this world despite COVID. I think a lot of people are coming together despite, the political unrest and everything in the world just globally. I think that there are a lot of things that get overlooked. Work with you guys here in this chat. It's great to meet people that are just, willing to open up and talk. If humanity, and now I'm going off on a tangent, but if we can't get along, then what are we doing? We're all trapped here. Let's just try and get along.
I love
preach, that. Andrew, preach.
I love it. Motivating. You're just motivating, man. You're just motivating. It's just great to hear that. Yeah,
we needed this, and we all needed this.
I love
the truth. It's easy to forget the little things.
It is.
But you're saying things that just make so much sense, and it's so refreshing to hear an administrator say it. And I know it's just very cool to hear that. I'm wondering that you've been, I know I can't go down. you're on both sides now. What would you like educators to be mindful of, to be thinking of in the role of an administrator? And on the other side, what would you like administrators to be more mindful of and be thinking of in the role of teachers right now? Because you're on that line right now. And if anything, out of everybody in your building, you're probably the one in the middle the most, because you have somebody above you, and the teachers obviously feel comfortable talking to you. I mean, gosh, just with your sharing with us tonight. So that must be an interesting position, hard position, challenging. What would you want both sides to know more about each other, just so we can get through this a little bit better?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it before, and not to harp on the business mentality, but we're definitely within an imperfect system that right now is larger than us, and we're operating within a very imperfect time, being COVID-19. There's always challenges without that in our, facing us. So the first thing I would say is nothing is personal. We just have to get things done so that we could, do our jobs at the end of the day. We're getting paid tax dollars to do a job for a clientele, for the community. And so nothing is personal. We're all in it together. I think it's really easy for on the teacher side or on the admin side or on whatever side, it's really easy to adopt an us versus them type thing, because people need an enemy to kind of galvanize around. Well, our common enemy right now is a global pandemic. So we could all be together and defeat this thing. And listen, nothing is easy. If it was easy, everybody could do it. So here's the thing. We have to just keep perspective. And I'll be honest, I'll give you an example. Observing teachers right now, there definitely is in my head a little bit of COVID leeway. Like, okay, they might not be able to do this to that degree or this to that degree, and they should not be penalized for that from a rubric. And so, I think to answer your question in one succinct statement, just understanding each other's circumstances. If we can just do that and not be so herky-jerky with our reactions and all this stuff, I think if we just take a step back, take a breath, realize that Andrew is a human being trying to do his job, he's here to support me, or that whoever your teacher is, teacher A, is just trying to do their best, all these things. The old adage, if you assume things, you make an ass out of you and me, right? I think there's a lot of assumptions pre-COVID, probably will be after COVID, a lot of assumptions in education that this person does nothing or this person does. Listen, we all have different circumstances that we're operating within. But remember, we're on the same team. If, once again, if we're running a football play and, one of my receivers is not up to par, I mean, we have to hold each other accountable. It's not me as the admin holding everybody else accountable. No, you hold me accountable too. I think it's just that. It's shared accountability. It's empathy of understanding. To give you, to finish this, to give you a specific, I usually make sure that I send out some type of positive email personally, not widespread to like a grade level, to one person. It takes me a long time, but to each and every teacher that I kind of supervise, just about something, because here's why. I like to be in classrooms a lot. I feel like that's important for me to better understand what the teacher is going through. And they understand that because I've communicated that. But when I give them feedback on not necessarily an instructional thing, just about their demeanor, or, I really appreciated how you did X and Y or what have you. Compliments go a long way. And this is not to butter someone up, but it's just to lessen the impact and to disarm people. When you really do have a bit of feedback to help them improve, they'll be able to take it in much better.
I love that. You reminded me of something. I spent a number of years on active duty. And one of the things that I used to do was so we didn't have a lot of power to give money out, or we can maybe give time off, and getting awards would often get downgraded. So you were left as a junior officer, whether you're a captain, and I was a captain at the time of this, and I used to write letters to the parents. and they didn't know about it. And it would come back around to them eventually. And now some of these people were in their late 20s, or they were, whatever. That little investment of time though had dividends that to this day still pay back. And I applaud you for doing that, because keep doing that. That has a huge impact. Personalization is so valuable. And when you touch people that way, they know you care. So that's awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you as well for serving. And I do want to highlight that it's to answer Pete. It's definitely not easy on the administrative side. There's certain pressures. There's definitely a certain stigma if I walk in the room that I can't shed just because of the position I hold, and that's just the reality of it. But the thing is, when we create partnerships rather than supervisor-supervisee, dynamics, I feel like it just helps children. And I think that's definitely, solidified over time. I think I'm there right now. I think my staff would say the same. But it's all about positioning. I think the way you position yourself is paramount to how that relationship is going to go. And I also think less is more. Don't, as an administrator, I know a lot that talk a lot. We need to listen. Same thing with teachers, listen to your students, things like that. I think we're in the business of listening to people, not necessarily talking. Like I said, Letitia, I can't handle the 3-hour meetings anymore. I'm sorry. I can't do it.
So what we normally do here at the end, Andrew, is we go around and each of us give kind of like one takeaway or something that we're going to hold on to from this conversation. And then we usually like our guests to kind of wrap it up with a final thought or takeaway that you'd like to share. So Fred, I'm going to throw it to you. Big surprise. What's a takeaway tonight that you want to share with us?
I think it was early on in the conversation, Andrew, you made the statement of simple yet significant. And I just love the vibe of that. And, while we were talking, the thought that occurred to me about, taking the time to stop and listen to somebody, or taking the time to talk to them. I really tried to challenge myself while we were still talking. I was trying to think of, what have I ever lost when I gave time to somebody? So, in that moment where you feel like you got to rush off to go do something in Word or your Excel spreadsheet or editing a video or whatever, that time that you actually stopped to give to that person your full measure of attention. Did anything else ever happen? Did you lose your job? No. Did you not get the task done? No. But yet you took the time to invest and look, and where that goes. It does nothing but good. But yet we struggle with that, right? But I love that's simple yet significant. And that's what that is. I mean, it just shows you care. That's awesome.
Great. Letitia?
I'm feeling like we're having a warm, fuzzy moment right now.
It could be gas.
I mean, what's happened this week, buddy? Well, I am vacillating between two, but I'm going to pick a question that you ask yourself when a teacher is coming to you. What does this have to do with children? Keep your eyes on the why. And I think so often we get so scattered and we get off track and off focus because we really forget about the why. So that is my takeaway. Let's refocus, reset on our why.
Nice. Pete?
Andrew, I was taking notes like, oh, that's a good one. Write that down. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. I mean, gosh. You got season 2 and 3 tonight, and good luck on that book, man. Gosh, this is great. The one that's sticking with me right now, it's connected to what everybody else is saying. When we lose understanding of each other, we lose everything. That's brilliant. And it's so simple and yet so complicated right now. And if our younger generations are getting a better picture of that, that's exciting for the future, because a lot of adults can learn that as well. So yeah, there we go.
Great. And mine is, competing with yourself is the only competition that matters. I think that just speaks so many volumes, just not as a self, as an individual, but also if you think about in the school, we've talked a lot of times about you see a teacher being successful and then you get alienated by your colleagues a lot of times because there's kind of like this weird tension thing now. Don't worry about it. You're your own competition. You aim for the stars if that's what you want to do, because your students will only, I think, reap the benefits. So Andrew, I'm tossing the ball to you. Use a sports analogy. Final thoughts or a little takeaway that you'd like to leave us with tonight?
There's definitely one, and I'll explain it this way. So, we spoke about business a bit. We are investors, but we're investors in human capital, right? And everybody's kind of always inundated with so much information each day. So it's like, how do you become memorable? And I think we've all said it. It just comes down to you care. And I think in terms of with children, here's my takeaway. It's like you never want to break a promise to a kid. Because if you just do the simple thing of, like Fred was saying, just devoting a minute to somebody, a child or an adult, and show you care, I think you've done your job of investing.
Great. Thank you so much. And where can our listeners or audience find you?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter at AJCANLE. And then I'm on some other, the Instagram, the YouTube at Educanle Presents. That's EDUCANLE. And one thing I do want to highlight, I feel like I have to highlight this a lot because there's misunderstanding about it. You can text me for help, 516-289-0007. And it's through an app. So I don't see your phone number. You don't even have to give me your name. A lot of people that have texted me, it's been about, help with lesson design or help with, a given situation at their job, something like that, where you're just seeking mentorship or just need somebody to listen. Like I said earlier, you could text me at that number.
Great. Thank you. And Pete, where can our TPR colleagues find us?
Hey, we love connecting with our fellow educators. We love hearing feedback from you all. We're on Facebook, YouTube, the website, teacherpeprally.com. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review. Help us continue to connect with educators, awesome people like Andrew all around the world. And that's that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew. This was really a pleasure. And at some point, I'd love to talk some more with you about soccer.
And if you're ever in the Poconos, I'll have to you have to swing by and we'll grab something to eat when those days return soon, I hope. So
I could always eat. And I could always talk soccer. So it sounds perfect.
There you go.
Nice.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here.